The following segment comes from a full SEC preview episode from Running Out the Clock. If you like what you hear in this segment, then be sure and subscribe to the channel so that you can catch all of our SEC previews, including whether or not we think the teams discussed in these previews will do better, worse, or the same this season. Number 2 in the East last season, sneaking into that 2 spot. A 5-3 conference record, which would have put them at 4th in the West. Man, the West was competitive. But number 2, a successful year, something that Will Muschamp really needed as a coach to try to, continue to establish that he can be a guy you can trust with the program. Again, another Ed Orgeron comparison there. Still a guy that you're not sure you can actually trust, and he's trying to prove something. But he's able to go 9-4, and perhaps notably ended the season on a high note, winning in the bowl game. But the storyline for the Gamecocks this season revolves around the word tempo. See, under Will Muschamp, both Florida and South Carolina have fielded solid defenses, and that's no real surprise because Muschamp is kind of promising defensive abilities over his career. That's kind of his selling point. However, over his 7 seasons as a head coach, he is currently on his 4th offensive coordinator. Offense in general has been hard to come by for years in South Carolina, even going back to the Spurrier days when it seemed like he could never quite find the right combination of a good quarterback, a good wide receiver, a good running back. Never could get everyone there at the same time. When he's had decent quarterbacks, he hasn't had many people to throw to. And then when he's had absolute monsters like Marcus Lattimore or Alshon Jeffrey, there's not a whole lot else on the offense to balance it out and assist.
Steven Garcia, baby.
Exactly. You've still got Steven Garcia. So never once in that time in recent memory has South Carolina necessarily combined all aspects of offense at once. And this is the year in which they might have it a little bit more together to an extent. They don't have a standout running back, but they've got a decent running back by committee system. Their top 2 rushers last year combined for 1,000 yards, and split carries almost evenly. I think they both had 98, 95 carries, something in that range. They return an experienced starting quarterback in Jake Bentley, and wide receiver Deebo Samuel, who actually had several touchdowns and was looking towards a very promising season before being injured in Game 3 and missing the final 10 games of the year. So whether or not that's a huge quality of talent, it remains to be seen exactly how good those players are. But the fact that everyone's there together all at once in an actual experienced offense is something that they need to celebrate and need to try to take advantage of. The key is in the coordinator, Brian McClendon, who was promoted to that role this past season, who is planning on pushing the tempo, has Will Muschamp's blessing to run a lot more of an up-tempo style offense. And I have to read this actual quote from him in terms of running an up-tempo offense. Are you guys ready for this? Because
bring it on, buddy. Bring
some insight. It's really simple. The more plays you run, the more opportunities you get for yards and points. You just get more at-bats. That's right. He's mixing sports metaphors.
It just means
more in SEC. That's the biggest thing. We're going to try to keep snapping the ball and keep getting points. That's the plan. We want to be balanced and stay aggressive and be in attack mode as much as possible. God only knows what any of that actually means. Because
listen here. We're talking about football here. Get the ball in the end zone. Prove the other guys can get in the end zone. It's football. Just football.
I love it. This reminds me.
That honestly sounds like something that John Madden would say.
Yeah, exactly. The only difference here is that I don't John Madden was a brilliant football mind with no ability to speak, and we're not sure where Brian McClendon falls right now. But he's inexperienced, but he wants to push the tempo and take advantage of the offense, and that seems to be what South Carolina really needs this season. On defense, it's actually very inexperienced, which is a little bit rare. They have defensive tackle Junior Kinlaw, linebacker T.J. Brunson, who are veterans and productive players and expected to have good seasons as well. Outside of that, there's a lot of new territory, a lot of unproven guys, questions about lack of depth. If someone gets hurt, what do they do? But it's also the one area that Will Muschamp's kind of trusted in. Like, people just kind of expect him to at least put together a good enough defense, even if there's a lot of question marks around. And that's kind of what they were, especially last season. So let's look at some last season numbers. They held opponents to 22 points or less in 7 games. So over half the season, and all of those were wins. Now, 22 points a game in like modern football is not exactly like a huge amount. Like, that 22 points a game is a massive amount in the 60s. It's unheard of in the 50s. But 22 points a game isn't like a massive amount. So when they hold opponents to like a relatively decent point total, then they're winning. When the defense does their job and limits the amount of points, they seem to be winning. All 4 of their losses, of course, obviously, were when the team scored 23 or more points, which, again, isn't like a massive amount of points. 4 out of the 6 games, 2 of those losses were against number 4 Clemson, number 2 Georgia. And then they went to the Outback Bowl against Michigan, won 26-19, again holding opponents under 22 points. So there's this range in there where the defense does well enough to hold teams to low to mid 20s, and the offense can't do enough to score points. Keith, does that sound a little bit like Will Muschamp's Florida?
Yeah. There's a glitch in the matrix.
Right. So it stands to reason that a South Carolina defense this year can adapt to can put enough together to be a decent defense like Will Muschamp can pretty consistently put together. If they can adapt also to the new tempo that their offense wants to run, because we mentioned on the show that sometimes that can be a bit of a weak area. We talked about teams like Ole Miss and Missouri, whose offenses sometimes were too fast for the defense. If they can keep themselves in games through the defense, then, hey, if the offense pulls itself together, maybe they score 30 points and win a couple more games.
Sure, yeah. I mean, that's what everybody was always waiting for at Florida. Like Muschamp's defenses at Florida would hold people under 15 points typically, and the offense would struggle to even outscore their own defensive points.
Yes,
and so maybe the new OC is gonna do better than all of his old OCs.
Yeah. I think that's their like strength on offense, is that they're bringing in a guy who has a little bit of experience running the offense, and that at this point they're giving him the keys to the car and saying, go run the offense, do well. And he's getting like all of his tools back that he had last season when the offense did do pretty well.
Right.
So, like that combination is what people are hoping. Okay, maybe this is the time that, it comes together enough to take advantage of the transition period at Florida, maybe take advantage of the fact where Tennessee is right now, take advantage of all this to lock down another, second in the East type of year.
And their schedule favors that a whole bunch. I mean, it's like the East is going to be pretty cake through most of it. And there are 2 teams from the West are Ole Miss and Texas A&M, who are not the cream of the crop out West,
And they get A&M at home.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So their favor does them a lot, or their schedule does them a lot of favors this year for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that also plays in their favor. It seems to be a pretty favorable year. The biggest questions, which is really strange considering South Carolina and Will Muschamp, is that like they're not really sure what the defense is actually going to look like. What are they going to do? I mean, some of the numbers, like Jake Bentley this past season threw for about 2,800 yards on 62% completion. Didn't have great touchdown to interception numbers, 18-12. Now, granted, his best wide receiver got hurt in game 3. But then you have that combo of A.J. Turner and Tyson Williams, 98 carries, 95 carries, 531 yards, 471 yards. But, again, the person who – not too many rushing touchdowns. The person that led the team in rushing touchdowns was quarterback Jake Bentley. They love to just throw him in on the goal line, I guess.
Not ideal.
No, not exactly what you want. But so, Chandler, is this the season? Do you think that the East is in a situation in which South Carolina can take advantage enough of everything, pull to like, do they have the talent enough, but can they take advantage enough as well to pull together and maybe land another number 2 finish?
I definitely think so. I mean, when you look at their schedule, they get Georgia the second week of the season, and that could be a little bit more interesting than you think it would be because, you catch Georgia. Georgia's replacing some running backs, some key defensive pieces, and then say you've got a healthy Jake Bentley, a healthy Deebo Samuel. That game could be very interesting. Not to say that I'm looking at it and predicting a South Carolina win, but I mean the games in Columbia. It's the prime time 2:30 game, September the 8th. I mean, like it's going to be a big stage, and what better stage to show, hey, we're ready to do this than that game for South Carolina. And so, but you look at Georgia and you look at Clemson. I mean, those are really the only 2 games that you look at and say, when you look at their schedule, that you say those are the only 2 games that they're going to be outmatched in talent. And like I said, maybe they catch Georgia enough early enough that it really surprises them. And I think that realistically, South Carolina is all but a lock to finish second in the East. But again, that game gets weird, on the 8th, and maybe you're talking about South Carolina playing in the SEC championship game. Because when you look at the rest of the East, I don't think Vanderbilt can really, not Kentucky, Missouri, we'll see, Tennessee, no. Florida, they got to go to Florida, but it'll be late in the season. So, I mean, South Carolina, I think if there was going to be a dark horse team that would maybe even win the SEC East that just kind of comes out of nowhere to do it, I think it would be South Carolina because, like I said, they've got a very talented Deebo Samuel, a very experienced, very good quarterback. And, they find a couple of pieces on defense, and I think you're looking at a really good team.
Ro, piggybacking off of that, you do have all that experience. You do have some solid talent, especially in quarterback and with Deebo Samuel. You're returning the guy that, kind of had to fill the shoes and be your leading receiver last season in Brian Edwards. So, but maybe none of these guys are what you would call a classic, like offensive standout, maybe Deebo Samuel, but, obviously we didn't get to see enough of him last year, which is a shame. So if you've got maybe that, is that enough? Is it enough to have a good, in the modern game, a good balanced offense without like a one standout guy? If you're a team like South Carolina, I mean, if you're Alabama, it seems like you have the best offensive line. You plug whoever you want back there and let them, show out. But a team like South Carolina that maybe doesn't quite have this, that same offensive line, we don't know anything about them, but they got decent skill. Is that enough for success?
Is that enough? Let me answer it in 2 parts here. First question I have for you is, does Jadeveon Clowney still play? Is he still on the team?
I mean, he is on a team.
He's on a team. Probably not in this particular conference.
Yeah.
League, and he's definitely playing in the NFL. Yeah, unless he comes back, we are a long way removed from the days of Jadeveon Clowney and the 43 sacks of that season. Yeah. That was a great season for them. That was in like maybe 2013 or 12, something like around there. That was the pinnacle of South Carolina football, and it was on the defensive side of the ball. So to answer your question about the offense, I mean, I know they have the dude coming back, Samuel, who is a stud. Like the first 3 weeks of the season, had they given the Heisman Trophy out in the first 3 weeks, that guy probably would have gotten a couple of votes because he had at that point had like 5 catches in each of the first 3 games for like 250 yards and 3 scores. He was incredible.
He was averaging 16.7 yards per catch.
Yeah. But they were playing like, NC State and Missouri, and then I think he went out with Kentucky, like a broken leg or something like that. And he was gone for the year. So he comes back, and he was good, and he'll be good this year. But it's not going to be enough, man. Let's just be honest. I think, like I said from our previous episodes, I honestly think that Tennessee has an opportunity to take a step up in the right direction. I don't know if they're going to get past South Carolina this year, but they're going to give them some fits in the East. Certainly with Vandy. I don't think Kentucky is going to be quite like they were last year. I think they're going to take a step back. So it's going to be this weird, like, no man's land, 3 or 4 teams in the East that are going to be able to move up a little bit. So is South Carolina going to, pull the world's greatest upset and finish first in the East? Absolutely not. Second, maybe. In all likelihood, they'll be stuck in that no man's land down there. Definitely not last, but definitely not first. So in the Ricky Bobby world, that means that you are last.
Right.
That's my take on that.
Okay.
I they need Jadeveon Clowney and the boys of 2013 and Alshon Jeffrey and all that to come back. Then maybe they'll have success.
Maybe so. Man, got some differing opinions here. Got some differing opinions. I like it. Good banter. Good banter, guys. Thanks again for listening to this specific individual team preview. If you want more content like this, be sure to subscribe to Running Out the Clock so you don't miss any more of our SEC previews leading up to this season. You can find the full episode that this comes from by searching for our 2018 SEC Preview full episodes. And you'll want to listen to that because we give a verdict at the end of whether or not we feel like the team mentioned will do better, worse, or stay the same. For Running Out the Clock, I'm your friend Joseph Craven. Thanks for listening.